Nicolas Maduro is currently sitting in a federal detention center in Brooklyn, awaiting trial for narco-terrorism.
Right.
The U.S. military captured him on January 3rd, 2026. Yet, if you look at the prediction markets right now, specifically Polymarket, he is trading at 74% to be the recognized leader of Venezuela by year-end 2026.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
You are staring at a market pricing a man in a jail cell with a basically a 3 in 4 chance of running a sovereign nation.
Exactly. And the mission of this deep dive is to figure out why. Because as a leveraged trader looking for asymmetry, this is where you live. This isn't about political sentiment at all.
No, not at all.
It's about the hard, dated, binary events approaching in late June and early July that are going to make highly leveraged positions either immensely profitable or entirely worthless.
Right, because the resolution criteria of this specific market really dictate that reality. The contracts resolve based on formal legal recognition, not, physical proximity to the presidential palace.
Right.
So we are looking at a scenario where the institutional plumbing in Caracas has intentionally frozen, and your edge as a trader is entirely in understanding the mechanics of that freeze.
So contextualizing that 74% price requires setting aside basic intuition for a second. Holding a long position on Maduro right now is, it's like buying stock in a company where the CEO is in jail, but the board of directors hasn't officially filed the paperwork to fire him.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So because that paperwork is missing legally, his signature is still required on all the corporate checks, even though he pleaded not guilty alongside his wife, Celia Flores, and is physically incapacitated from governing.
Right. But the Chavista institutional apparatus simply refuses to file the constitutional equivalent of that paperwork.
Which is what exactly.
Under the Venezuelan constitution, it requires a formal declaration of absolute absence by the National Assembly. That is what officially ends a presidency under these circumstances.
Okay, and that declaration would trigger elections, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It triggers a mandated sequence of new elections. But because the National Assembly has not convened to drop that gavel, the legal status quo just holds.
Wow.
And I should note here, we take absolutely no political stance in this deep dive. We are simply reporting the market realities and institutional facts that you must price in. But the fact is, the international community remains incredibly fragmented.
Yeah, major geopolitical actors are still treating Maduro's administration as the legitimate sovereign government. They're refusing to acknowledge the U.S. intervention.
Right. So that 74% pricing is essentially a massive premium placed on institutional inertia. The market is betting the regime would rather maintain the legal fiction of Maduro's presidency from Brooklyn than risk fracturing their own internal coalition by officially naming a successor.
But the risk-reward geometry for your portfolio on that long side is bordering on toxic. If you are buying Maduro at 74 cents on the dollar, your upside is severely compressed.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's say institutional gridlock holds and the contract drifts up to 85% as the year progresses. That is just an 11-cent move. Even applying standard 5x leverage only gets you a modest bump on your deployed capital.
Right.
But the downside is a sheer vertical cliff. If the upcoming July deadlines actually force the National Assembly to declare that absolute absence and Maduro's contract violently corrects down to, say, 40%, you just swallowed a 46% position loss.
Yeah, and at 5x leverage, your account is wiped out instantly.
So why would any rational trader hold that 74% long position? Is it purely just a stubborn thesis trade on regime durability?
Mostly, yeah. The mathematical asymmetry heavily favors the short seller here. Purchasing a 26-cent contract that simply requires Maduro to not be the recognized leader by December 31st offers nearly a 4x unleveraged return.
Right, and applying 5x leverage to that short position mathematically scales into portfolio-altering multiples.
Exactly. The traders holding the 74% long side are aggressively underwriting the assumption that the Chavista regime has the discipline to let the summer constitutional deadlines expire without flinching.
They're betting the regime will absorb the political damage just to keep the legal framework intact.
Right. But if the market knows Maduro is paralyzed, the real momentum play has to lie with whoever possesses actual operational control on the ground in Caracas.
It's because someone is signing the orders, someone is paying the military.
Exactly. And that operational reality brings us directly to Delcy Rodriguez, the acting president.
Yeah.
She represents the most aggressive price action on the entire board right now.
Yeah, let's talk about her, because she surged from 3% back in January up to 16% today.
Which is a 433% unleveraged position gain. Traders who identified her consolidation of power early and, applied leverage, they're already sitting on returns exceeding 2,000%.
That's insane, because she invoked Article 234 of the Constitution on January 5th. That was just 2 days after Maduro's capture, which allowed her to step in as interim president.
Right. And her governance since then has not been ceremonial at all.
Yeah.
She is fundamentally rewiring the state.
Which is what makes that 16% price tag look like a glaring mispricing to me. On January 30th, she signed historic legislation opening up PDVSA, the state oil monopoly, to private control.
Yeah, that was huge.
That fundamentally shifts control of the national revenue stream away from the old military guard and into a new network of private entities that she is directly licensing.
And then in March, she ousted Vladimir Pedrino Lopez.
Right.
I mean, this is a man who served as the defense minister for 11 years under Maduro. He was the ultimate untouchable power broker.
But she fired him. She executed a major reset of the Armed Forces command structure, and she is now the primary figure negotiating sanctions relief directly with the United States.
Exactly. Decapitating the defense ministry was her proving she has the internal capital to neutralize any immediate coup threat from the old guard. By privatizing the oil infrastructure, she is systematically buying the loyalty of the institutional power brokers. She is executing all the functions of a permanent head of state.
Which forces a very sharp question. If Delcy Rodriguez is the one actively firing the top military brass, completely rewriting national oil policy, and sitting across the table from Washington to negotiate sanctions, why is the market deeply discounting her at just 16%?
It's a great question.
Why is the actual operational leader trading like a long shot?
Because that discount is entirely driven by a hard, unyielding constitutional clock.
Right, Article 234.
Exactly. Article 234 of the Venezuelan Constitution gives her the authority to act as interim president, but it places a strict 180-day limit on that power. She cannot govern indefinitely under this provision.
And that 180-day clock slams shut right at the beginning of July.
Between July 2nd and July 5th, 2026, to be exact, her interim mandate legally expires. That constitutional hard stop is the artificial ceiling suppressing her price on Polymarket right now.
Because the market expects that the National Assembly will be forced into a corner by this deadline.
Right. They either have to declare the absolute absence, which legally strips her of the interim title and triggers new elections, or they have to engineer a highly controversial legal maneuver to formalize her power, or they simply revert to recognizing Maduro's frozen status.
So we are looking at a cluster of binary deadlines hitting almost simultaneously, which creates this massive catalyst window because first you have June 30th.
Right, the court date.
Maduro and Cilia Flores have a scheduled court appearance in Brooklyn, and a leak from that courtroom could trigger an immediate repricing before the constitutional clock even runs out.
Oh, absolutely. If word breaks that Maduro is discussing a plea deal, cooperating with U.S. authorities, or even experiencing severe health issues, that 74% price could crater in minutes.
The Brooklyn court date is the primer, but the July 2nd through 5th window is the actual detonation.
Yeah, because the expiration of Rodriguez's interim mandate forces the hand of the National Assembly, which, by the way, happens to be led by Jorge Rodriguez, who is currently trading as a massive tail risk himself at 1%.
Wait, so when they convene, if they vote to legally extend Delcy's mandate through some new constitutional interpretation, what happens?
Her contract will likely gap up instantly to the 30 or 40% range. But if they declare absolute absence, the entire board flips.
Approaching this window is exactly like holding a binary options contract right up to the expiration date. You cannot sit on the sidelines, wait for the National Assembly to broadcast their vote, and then try to enter the market.
No, absolutely not. The Polymarket order books will dry up the second the news hits the wire.
You must have your chips positioned before the gavel drops because the repricing will be violent and instantaneous.
And that absolute absence declaration is the scenario where the leverage on the short side of Maduro pays off optimally. If the National Assembly triggers the election sequence, the top of the board collapses.
Maduro's 74% plummets.
Right. Delcy Rodriguez's operational control is thrown into legal jeopardy. And suddenly, the extremely cheap single-digit contracts sitting at the bottom of the board transform from lottery tickets into the most lucrative momentum plays in the entire market.
Let's shine a light on that bottom tier, because the 1% to 7% range is where the maximum asymmetry lives for traders who are willing to take on highly path-dependent scenarios.
Yeah, let's look at it.
At the very top of this bottom bracket, you have Maria Corina Machado sitting at 7%. She is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, currently operating in exile, who announced in May that she intends to return to Venezuela with U.S. coordination to run for the presidency.
Right, and purchasing her contract at 7 cents on the dollar offers a 14x unleveraged return.
Which is huge.
It is, but her strategy requires a 7 to 9 month preparation window to organize a credible national election. And her entire thesis depends on the July catalyst. She needs the National Assembly to declare the absolute absence to legally open the door for that electoral timeline.
Wait, hold on. I want to draw a hard line here, because we cannot group Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez into the same bucket just because they are both trading in the single digits.
No, definitely not.
There is a massive mechanical difference between a path-dependent momentum trade and a purely retroactive lottery ticket. Edmundo Gonzalez is sitting at 1%. He is the 76-year-old former diplomat who is recognized by the United States as the actual winner of the heavily disputed 2024 elections.
And he's currently demanding a transfer of power from exile in Spain.
Right. So the probability profiles are entirely different.
The distinction lies in the institutional mechanics required for either of them to resolve positively. Machado is a forward-looking bet. Her contract requires a sequence of future events.
Like the July constitutional process triggering elections.
Right, and then she secures safe passage back to Caracas. The electoral timeline successfully compresses into late 2026, and she actually wins the vote. It is a narrow path, but it is a forward-moving mechanical sequence.
Exactly, whereas a bet on Gonzalez is fundamentally backward-looking. For a 1-cent Gonzalez contract to pay out 100x, you are betting on a retroactive institutional reversal.
Yeah, you're betting that the Chavista apparatus completely collapses and installs a man based on a 2-year-old disputed election result, completely bypassing the current constitutional mechanisms.
It's a pure lottery ticket.
It really is. And beyond the electoral candidates, the extreme tail risk plays represent pure bets on systemic failure. For instance, the no head of state contract is currently trading at 1%.
Which is a direct play on a total constitutional meltdown.
Exactly. If the July deadline passes, the National Assembly deadlocks and the military fractures, leaving a complete power vacuum by December 31st, that contract pays out.
Wow.
Then you have Diosdado Cabello Rondon at 0.5%. As the Interior Minister, he is a massive hardline power broker who publicly called the U.S. capture of Maduro a cowardly attack.
So taking a position on Cabello is a deep value bet that the Chavista old guard successfully executes an internal coup, elevating him to bypass both the constitutional process and Delcy Rodriguez.
Right. And we also see Dinora Figuera trading at 0.2%. She actually flew back to Venezuela on June 18th to negotiate the formation of a new National Electoral Council.
And then there is the ousted defense minister, Pedrino Lopez, also sitting at 0.2%. Delcy Rodriguez demoted him to agriculture minister in March. Buying Pedrino Lopez at fractions of a penny is basically buying a call option on a military junta taking over the country.
Exactly. But evaluating any of these long-shot electoral bets requires stepping back and looking at the secondary catalysts developing in the background. Because if the July deadline somehow results in an extension, pushing the ultimate resolution into the fall, these macroeconomic factors will start driving the price action.
Right, like Dinora Figuera's ongoing negotiations throughout July.
Yeah, that's a primary example. She is attempting to broker a credible National Electoral Council with the interim government. If links suggest those talks are making structural progress, the contracts for the opposition figures like Machado will see steady upward pressure, anticipating an eventual vote.
Because the opposition is demanding an October to December 2026 window for actual elections to satisfy constitutional requirements.
Correct.
But hanging over all of this political maneuvering is the macroeconomic reality of the oil sector. There is a critical late 2026, early 2027 oil production target set at 1.3 million barrels per day.
Yeah.
This target is directly tied to the success of Delcy Rodriguez's PDVSA privatization law, but, I have to question the immediate relevance for the trader here.
How so?
Does a physical oil production target that stretches into 2027 actually matter for a prediction market contract that definitively settles on December 31st, 2026? Like, does failing to pump crude fast enough actually crack a constitutional crisis before the market resolves?
It does, because political time is measured in liquidity. Failing to meet a physical barrel count doesn't directly alter the text of the Constitution, sure. However, failure to hit that 1.3 million barrel target means a failure to generate the hard currency required to maintain the loyalty of the military and the institutional apparatus.
Oh, I see.
Delcy Rodriguez is relying on that privatized oil revenue to pay off the power brokers. If the revenue streams fall short in Q3 or Q4, the military realizes the December payroll might not clear.
And that is when political instability accelerates.
Exactly. It all connects back to the core concept of regime durability. If Delcy Rodriguez manages to legally extend her mandate in July, but the oil revenue collapses in October, the likelihood of a fractured government, a military intervention, or a no head of state resolution skyrockets just as the polymarket contracts are approaching their December expiration.
Right, so let's synthesize the core thesis for your portfolio here. This market is not going to experience a slow, gradual drift based on public sentiment or diplomatic press releases. It is governed by hard, unforgiving binary deadlines. Polymarket is currently providing the price discovery, showing us that the broader market firmly believes institutional inertia will keep Maduro legally recognized, which justifies that 74% premium, while heavily discounting the operational ground-level reality of Delcy Rodriguez at just 16%.
Yeah.
But it is the application of 5x leverage that transforms these structural constitutional asymmetries into events that can completely redefine your quarter.
And the most critical variable you control right now is your entry timing. The trading window to capitalize on this asymmetry is open right now, but it's closing rapidly. You cannot wait for the June 30th Brooklyn court date to conclude, and you cannot wait for the July 2nd to 5th constitutional deadline to hit the news cycle.
Because the structural mispricing only exists in the uncertainty preceding the catalyst.
Exactly. The moment the National Assembly votes, the board reprices instantly, and the leverage opportunity vanishes.
But before you lock in your positions based on Venezuelan constitutional law and U.S. federal court schedules, consider one final variable. What happens to all of these highly leveraged, path-dependent contracts if a true black swan geopolitical event, an exogenous shock completely outside of the Brooklyn courts or the Caracas National Assembly, suddenly forces the fragmented international community to instantly unify and recognize one of the extreme tail risk figures, rendering this entire carefully modeled July constitutional debate completely moot?